The stray cats fucking made it impossible to sleep. On nights that languished in the 90s, I had to leave the window open to the unholiest choir ever performed. This was not how I imagined Italy. I stared at the ceiling and tried to distinguish the cats from each other. I'd given them names at that point. Milo was really giving it to Rocco. Or was it Lula? Rocco and Lula sounded alike. What was I doing here, I thought. It was my second week in Florence, and I was having a rough go of it. In my third year of college, I traveled to Italy for a study abroad program because I was just as motivated to leave my smoggy town of Redlands as most of my peers were, but I didn't want to go where everyone else went. Most people went to Salzburg, a city I had no interest in, mostly because people wouldn't shut up about how I absolutely had to go to Salzburg. In much the same way you get turned off from watching a hit TV show because people won't stop saying you have to watch it, that's how I felt about Salzburg. But the Salzburg kids weren't nearly as tiring as the Barcelona ones. They came back to California acting like they'd changed the world by visiting that little corner of it. They returned feigning contempt of American culture and consumerism, as if Spaniards didn't also know how to be capitalist dicks. I thought Italy was the anti-Barcelona, a unique expedition I could call my own. And as I watched my older brother, a newly commissioned Navy officer, jetting around the world with his squadron buddies, notching his belt with nation after nation, I only wanted to go more. The Navy recruiting ads really do tell the truth. You do get to see the world. And with each picture my brother sent from places like Egypt and Greece, my interest in my own adventure only increased. My father agreed to help pay for it. There was no way I could afford it on my own. Either he didn't care about paying for his son's grand Italian adventure, or he cared a lot and didn't tell me. It's probably the second one. One thing I expected he certainly did care about, I would get to see the Vatican before him. My dad, who was more Catholic than any 10 randomly chosen churchgoers, wanted more than anything to visit St. Peter's Basilica. Yet I, a bothersome college kid, incautiously flirting with full-blown atheism, would beat him to it. And he would pay for it. The study program also promised trips to the Tuscan hills, the canals of Venice, and a weekend in Rome. I couldn't wait. Movies informed a lot of my thinking back then, and my idea of Italy existed somewhere on the spectrum between Gladiator and Under the Tuscan Sun. A land of warriors and romance, of General Maximus and whoever it was Diane Lane played. I imagined myself walking the streets of Florence, perhaps dropping into a museum to ponder some magnificent piece of Renaissance art. I'd listen to an outdoor concert while sipping a glass of wine. I pictured myself as a worldly expat in a cafe, enjoying a cappuccino and writing profound musings in a calfskin notebook. It was going to be great. And then I actually got there. My first night in Florence was rough. My roommate was supposed to meet me and take me to the apartment where I was supposed to live, but he forgot and left me stranded at the airport. On that pre-smartphone era night, I wandered the city for hours without the benefit of GPS, my luggage cutting into my shoulders as I searched for a hotel, terrified I'd have to sleep on the street. Even after midnight, it was astonishingly hot. By the time I found a room and collapsed into bed, I had sweat through every stitch I wore. When I finally made it to the apartment, I thought things would get easier. I was housed with a bunch of guys from New Jersey, all in the same study program as me. With the exception of the dude who left me stranded at the airport, I got along with him. We drank refreshing Italian beer, ate buckets of gelato, and when we weren't in class, we cruised around the city sightseeing. I started to feel like I could make it work here. I could take on this challenge. If I could make it in this country, I could have the adventure I always wanted. But during those first few days in Florence, challenges kept piling up. It was the unrelenting heat, the threat of getting my elbows clipped by speeding Vespas, the pickpockets. It was the smell of the place with a sanitation department run by the mafia. But mostly it was the cats fucking. It was another hour before they called it for the night. The city hummed with more manageable sounds like the droning of two-stroke scooter engines and the chatter of pedestrians, and I finally slept. The next morning, I joined my roommates on a trip to Rome. I needed to see the Colosseum, something epic and inspiring. Maximus's grand arena awaited me, But as I packed, I noticed a burning sensation in my right shin. I examined my leg and found a swollen red lump. Something had bit me. It was a disturbing crimson boil, and it was warm and sensitive to the touch. Soon, my roommates were examining my leg with the same infantile curiosity that inspires young boys to catch insects in jars and light things on fire. Several of them used the word gnarly. I couldn't believe it. I wasn't even 2 weeks into the trip before the local fauna had attacked me. It was the clearest example yet that the country didn't want me there. Was it a centipede? Surely a mosquito couldn't inflict that kind of damage. The likeliest culprit, we agreed, was a spider. And the bite seemed to be growing larger, like it was primed to release whatever spawn had been implanted there. Just bandage it up. I thought, I'm not gonna let this ruin my chance to see the Colosseum. I mean, what would Maximus do in this scenario? You think he'd give up? Hell no. He'd be a badass. He probably wouldn't get bit by a spider in the first place, but that's not the point. Just get your ass on the bus and get to Rome. But by the time the bus got there, I was in agony. The bite itched like nothing I'd ever experienced. With every step on those cobblestone streets, my leg burned and raged. I tried with all my power to ignore it because, damn it, this was my adventure, my first real notch on my belt. Standing on the second tier of the Colosseum, I imagined myself where commoners and senators once stood, cheering as warriors perform mighty deeds for a ravenous mob. I had a sudden urge to stand in the middle of the arena and shout, "Are you not entertained?" But even the idea of hopping over the guardrail and landing on my feet reminded me of how much my fucking leg hurt. I saw a doctor the moment I got back to Florence. What was the Italian word for spider, I thought? Should I just approximate it using my high school Spanish, hoping the Italian word was similar? I removed the bandage and showed him the bite. Aranya, I offered. He took one look at my corrupted leg and wrote a prescription for an anti-inflammatory cream, scribbling with the confidence of a man who'd seen such bites before. The medication made it feel blessedly cool, and when wrapped in gauze, I felt like I had a handle on it. But that night, I awoke in pain. I flicked on a flashlight and looked under the covers. The wound had opened. I'm not going to show you a picture of that. A dribble of blood streamed from the boil as if it had been lanced, soaking into the sheets. Taking care not to wake my roommate, I rewrapped it and tossed the sheets into laundry, then collapsed onto the couch in the common room. And it refused to heal. I kept expecting a scab to form, but it never did. It just remained raw and open and stung fiercely when I walked anywhere. That's it. I'm done. You win, Italy. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this. Maybe the spider did me a favor. Maybe I should have just stayed home, or if not, I should have gone to Salzburg like everyone else did. Or, fuck it, I should have gone to Barcelona, then returned sounding like all those douchebags who pronounced it Barcelona. Maybe Italy was a mistake. My roommate noticed me wasting the day playing flash games on my laptop. The last thing I wanted to do was go outside. No museums, no cafes. I didn't even want a fucking cup of gelato. Just gonna stay inside all day, he challenged me. Stop feeling sorry for yourself and let's go somewhere. Something about his New Jersey accent made his tough love delivery hit extra hard. He was right. So I wrapped my leg in fresh gauze and we stepped into the pedestrian traffic outside the apartment. We started a 3-mile walk to the Accademia Gallery of Florence, home of Michelangelo's David. We passed over the Ponte Vecchio, the only bridge in the city Hitler decided not to blow up because he liked taking walks on it. At the second mile, my leg throbbed with every other step. Blood was soaking through the gauze, sending my mood into dark and grumpy territory. My roommate was excited to see the David. I wasn't. I had already seen several sculptures scattered around the city, seen one hunk of marble, seen them all, I thought. But when the crowd parted and offered me a full view of the statue, I understood. He stood 17 feet tall, and he was flawless. I'm not the least bit ashamed to admit that the first thing I noticed about David were his nipples. Perfectly round, a bit wider and spread apart on his chest than most men's, certainly wider than mine. He wasn't particularly muscular, but he did kind of look like he could kick Maximus's ass. Even at a distance, I could see his subtle heart-shaped pupils, the veins snaking up his right hand and disappearing into his cool alabaster forearm, the curly tangles of his hair, somehow boyish and mature at the same time. I read the plaque and learned something incredible. The statue depicted David before his battle with Goliath. I expected that Michelangelo sculpted him in a victorious pose, having just slung the fatal stone right between Goliath's eyes. But at the time of this depiction, he wasn't famous yet. He'd slain no giants and ruled no nations. He probably didn't even mind that he never left his hometown, unlike me, staring up at him in stunned silence so far away from mine. I was so busy concerning myself with my own achievement, I had forgotten to just be curious about the world instead of expecting something from it. Who cared about notches on a belt? This guy didn't even wear a fucking belt. I looked at the David for a long time and didn't once think about the blood dripping into my sock. The staff gently shooed us away. There were other visitors waiting for their own close-up view, so we left the gallery, headed back into the streets, and took a set of ancient stairs up a hill that looked out over the city. The Arno River glittered under a cloud-speckled sky. The Duomo's rust-colored roof stood imposingly in the daylight, and church steeples like sentinels on guard punctuated the skyline. It felt like looking at the city for the first time. The wound finally healed about a week after I got home. By the time the fall semester began, a scar had formed into a quarter-sized patch of skin, mottled and wrinkled. Back on campus, no one was especially curious about my trip. No one wanted to know if the Colosseum was as impressive in real life as it was in the movies, or how beautiful Florence was in the afternoon sun, or about how far apart David's nipples were. It was probably for the best, because I didn't want to start going on and on about how you absolutely have to go to Italy. Thank you.